Hi guys. Some of you said that you had some experience in your other class doing an outline, and that's what we're going to work on today. So we're going to follow the same structure that we talked about before. Let me actually share that one with you. So we're talking about this structure right here, starting with an opening, an inciting moment, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Those will be the main headings for our outline. So let's go back to the document. I just want to say that each paragraph should have a few different things in it. Usually each paragraph will focus on all three of these, or at least one of these. Each paragraph needs to be about a person, a place, or an action, but it will probably include all three. So those are the details that we're trying to put into each paragraph. If you don't have all of them, that's okay, but you should aim for all of them. You can start to build those with figurative language and sensory details. We have not talked a lot about sensory details, but sensory details have to do with your five senses. So they're sight, smell, sound, taste, let's start with touch, and taste. Where you can, try to fit those in. They're obviously not going to fit in every paragraph, but that's where they're going to fit in. So that's what the sensory details are. They have to do with the five senses. I have a link here for a website, and I'm going to share it with you really quickly. This is not a writing website. Usually I use writing websites. This is actually a marketing website, but it has some explanation of sensory details, and then the science behind sensory details, what sensory details are. But the thing that I really like is that it has a list of sensory details. So if I scroll all the way down here, these are some details that are visual. So these are the kinds of words that would indicate something visually. For tactile or touch, these are the kinds of words that would indicate tactile. Auditory has to do with sound. So these are all words that you could use for sound. Taste and smell we've got, and then motion if you want to use some really active verbs. So I'm going to share this site with you just because it has some good words that you might want to use when you're actually creating your video. What I want to talk about today, though, is the outline. So, of course, we've talked about person, place, and thing, and figurative and sensory details. I'm using the Book War here as our, in fact, I should probably write Book War up here, as our guide. So normally we start with the opening and the inciting moment. These two are actually reversed. So it's almost like the inciting moment goes up here and then the opening comes after it. And this is pretty common, but I just wanted you to understand that these two are switched. So the inciting moment. The narrator sees the neighbor reading. I have a clear topic there. It's not a complete sentence. It's just a short phrase to guide me. The narrator sees the neighbor reading. If I want to go back to my person, place, and action, I've got the place or the time. I know that it's China in 1968. The person who's like the star of this paragraph is the neighbor, and then the action is that she's reading under the streetlight. I really like that the author included some good sight words here. We can almost see in our minds the neighbor reading under the streetlight with frost on her shoulders, and she's shivering or shaking, and she's not just crying, she's sobbing. So the sobbing is the type of crying. So she used some really good sight and sound there, and we can really see this person, this child sitting on the street in the dark with the street light shining down on her. So that's the inciting moment that kicks off all of this story about the books. The narrator steps back a little bit, so it's almost like we're following a wave, like going up and down. There's a point of high action, and then a little bit of backstory, and then a point of high action, and then a little bit of backstory. And you can almost feel it going like a wave, up and down, up and down. So here the neighbor goes down a little bit and we learn some things about her. So the narrator says that she learned how to read really early. That's the person. We know that the place and the time has to do with the Cultural Revolution in China when Mao, the leader, was banning books. And we know that books were being burnt at that time. So that's the action. So we've got a person, a place, and an action. They used the phrase poisonous weeds here. You should know from yesterday that has to do, that's a metaphor. Books are not actually weeds, but she's calling them poisonous weeds. So we're not using like or as, it's just a straight metaphor. So after the narrator sees the neighbor reading, the rising action begins. And the neighbor notices that the narrator is watching. She draws attention to herself when she starts crying, then the neighbor gets scared, and the neighbor realizes she's not in danger. We don't really have a place here, but we have two different people, and then we have an action. When the neighbor gets scared, it says she's ready to fight me to the death. I don't think that these two small children in the middle of the night are actually going to murder each other. So you might recognize this as a hyperbole, as an exaggeration. Okay, so the neighbor sees her and she realizes she's not in danger. And then the rising action continues because they decide to start a book club together. So we've got that they traded books, the neighbor was very happy, and then they started a book club together. Again, we don't have a place for this one, but we do have the people involved, and then we have the action that they did. The rising action continues when the narrator finds more books under the chicken coop. Oh, did I skip our figurative language? Sorry. When she first traded books with the narrator, she gave the neighbor, I think it was 1001 Arabian Nights, but the neighbor squealed and started dancing in the twilight. So squealed is a sound that an animal usually makes, so that's definitely a sensory detail. And then we can see what it would look like if this small child was dancing in the street in the middle of the night. That's something that we can really easily picture in our head. Okay, so we've got rising action. The narrator finds some more books. She found some books under the chicken coop. And the chicken coop is a wooden structure that people have in their yards where the chickens are locked in. Sometimes there's like some metal on the front to keep the chickens from flying out. But usually, this is going to be disgusting, but usually the chickens go to the bathroom in there. And so it's covered with bird feces or bird poop. And if you can imagine the narrator in there digging under the ground to find a box of books, I think it sounds horrible, but I think the author really missed a chance for some sensory details there, because I can only imagine what a house where a bunch of chickens or like a shed where a bunch of chickens are going to the bathroom would smell like. As she finds the book, she calls them one treasure after another. We know that a treasure is actually a box of jewels and coins and money, or something very, very valuable. She is saying that the books are treasure. So again, this is another metaphor. They're not actually treasure. They're just treasure to her because they have value. Okay, so she finds more books. They continue their book club. And then the mother finds out, and the mother burns all of the books. So we have a person, we have an action, and then we have the places where she found all of the books. There's a few different things here. Another metaphor, because she's calling the books bombs because of the danger they could cause if they're found. And she's got a metaphor here because as the mom is burning the books, she says, my heart, our hearts turn to cinder. And cinder is like the ash after the wood that has been burnt, all of the ash at the bottom of the stove. So their hearts were like ashes. Okay, so that's the climax. That's the point of highest tension. Everything she loves has been taken away from her. And the mom is trying to make a decision for her and saying, we're not going to read these books. But then we have some falling action. The narrator remembers the stories. The narrator is sitting by herself outside. She says she's in the yard and the chickens are pecking around her. So again, visually, you can picture that. And she sees the Little Mermaid. I don't think she actually sees the Little Mermaid, but she's imagining the Little Mermaid from the story out in the yard with her, moving around and talking, and she basically appears to the neighbor. So we've got a place, we've got a person sort of, and we've got an action. The resolution is that after seeing this Little Mermaid and being inspired, the narrator decides to tell the stories to others. We've got a person, we've got an action, and then we've got like a place or a location. And it was summer nights and winter nights. So for some reason, she's only telling these stories at night. And as you know, the world is getting darker, she sees the stars rising in their eyes, in the eyes of her friends. So obviously this is a piece of figurative language. There aren't actually stars. She's comparing the shining, excited look in their eyes to that of stars. So this is what you're going to do today. And I know I went through this pretty fast, so you can stop the video if you want to and look at this again. But I'm going to ask you to do a few things. I'm going to ask you to complete your outline, and I'm going to ask you to also read Diving In. And I'm going to pause right here and give you some time to read the story Diving In. It's in the chapter 4, writing today, and it's only 2 pages long. So as you're reading, try to identify all elements of narrative in the story. And then we're going to come back and actually talk about your outline. So the next video is going to be pretty short. Okay, I'll see you guys in a couple minutes.